Hello, everyone. It's amazing. I have so many people already chatting it up. A lot to talk about today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And today's theme is I'm going to go over a lot of the stuff that's happened over the last week related to the videos that I posted and some other things. And thank you for the great support. The channel has really exploded over the last week. I mean, I did not expect it to be as crazy as it has become. And what's so wonderful about it is all of the positive, good people that are out there that are expressing essentially just all they want is freedom. They good-hearted people that don't want to be under an oppressive regime. And I think all of us, no matter what country that you're in right now, we're in across the planet. We are all under oppressive totalitarianism regimes. And what's happening in Canada right now, I think, was kind of, unexpected from the standpoint of all the things you could think of happening where the tides would turn and it would become where, you know, more of us are kind of standing up to oppression by the governments, our federal governments across the planet, that it would start from a truckers rally in Canada. Who would have thought of something like that? That's where it would come from. But that's what's happened, and it's wonderful. But as wonderful as it is, there are these people who are in these oppressive governments are doing everything they can, along with the state-owned media that is controlled by these governments, and those who think they know better than us are trying to keep us from expressing those views. And so I'm going to talk about a few of those today, starting with Joe Rogan. And it seems as if there's an orchestrated takedown of Joe Rogan and his podcast, and I think primarily because of the fact that if you look at the polls of viewership, it's people like him, it's people like Tim Pool, it's others online, Jimmy Dore, and plenty of others out there that are actually covering what's going on. And state governments don't like that, and the media doesn't like that, because it's taking away from their viewership and it's taking away from their narrative. And so they're doing everything they can to try and destroy the competition. And that's what's happening with Joe Rogan. Like I said, an orchestrated takedown of the competition. Spotify at this point, I was looking at it this morning, has actually taken down 100 now episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast. And some of you, I'm sure, have seen online what's happening with him, and what he's having to apologize for some language that he used in the past. And what I find funny is that language that he used was in some of the podcasts that he had done quite a long time ago, which is kind of interesting that it's being brought up now. And he's a threat. He's 1 million viewers per episode, as opposed to any other multi-million or billion-dollar network. He's just crushing them. And this is the main reason why I decided I didn't want to have cable anymore, because I didn't want to listen to CNN, CBS, ABC, CNBC, ABC, all the alphabet networks, because I knew what I was getting wasn't the truth. And I cut my cable so I can go on places like YouTube and watch independent creators like a Tim Pool, like Jimmy Dore, and even Joe Rogan, to hear what they have to say. And what I find funny is you seen this slide here. When you go to YouTube, this is what they consider top news. The stuff we tried to get away from. The things I cut the cable for. The reason I didn't want to listen to cable anymore. The reason I didn't want to, listen to the alphabet networks. Then they force it on you and call it top news and silence everybody else. And, this is a major problem. And when all of us try to get away from this stuff, and then we go on YouTube, we go to these independent channels, we're being force-fed the stuff that we're trying to get away from. And that's what's happening right now, unfortunately, to Joe Rogan. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. When it comes to Joe Rogan, I'm not as big of a fan of his than I am like a Tim Pool, Jimmy Dore, or Steven Crowder, or those kinds of guys, because I think with Joe Rogan, he's just been around for such a long time. He's a talented comedian, funny guy that way. Personality kind of reminds me of where I grew up in New Jersey. It wasn't really a lot of fun. That's why I love Florida. I see a lot of people here in the chat wish they lived in Florida, and I can understand that because living in Florida has been great, but growing up in New Jersey was an absolute nightmare. But seeing Joe Rogan's podcast and watching Joe Rogan's podcast reminds me a lot of that kind of Jersey guy. I think he's from Jersey, and I think what makes his show, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is the guests that he has. He's got really, really good guests, and the guests that he have counter the narrative that you see on mainstream media, and that's what the mainstream media doesn't like. So by trying to silence him, trying to destroy him, it's simply just getting rid of the competition. And then being able to suppress the news that we're all looking for. Those of you who are on this channel, those are of you that are trying to find out what's going on with the trucker rally, what's going on with the protests, because nobody's covering it. And it's really a shame. It really tells you something. And some of those things that you definitely don't see on the mainstream media at all is just the overwhelming number of people that are showing up in Ottawa. I mean, first it started with the trucks. Then you have the farm tractors, the farmers that are showing up. And now we have people on horseback that are coming in. And again, all of these people, they're good people. They're not violent protesters like if the mainstream media does cover it at all, they're talking about how violent the protesters are, how horrible the protesters are. And I'm going to go over that in a little bit. But watching the traffic and how many people are going in, and when you're able to see some of the things on YouTube and the coverage, it's really quite amazing. But as more people start going into Ottawa, and as more people start to gather peacefully and are supporting each other, bringing food to each other, doing all these wonderful things, the Ottawa police are not only turning on the protesters and treating them as if they're villains, and saying that they're doing it illegally and that they're violent, and now being called insurrectionists. I'm seeing that term being thrown around now. This police chief, Peter Slowly, is saying this.
There is no facilitation of food, water, fuel, logistics, or funding by any member of this police service or any other police service that I am aware of. Let me repeat. There is no supply of food, water, fuel, logistics, or anything else that relates to enabling this demonstration by any member of the Ottawa Police Service or any other police service that I am aware of. Should that information come to me, you can be clear, as Chief of Police in this service, I will conduct a full investigation. I will use the full extent of the Police Service Act and, if relevant, the Criminal Code to pursue charges against such a member who would do that.
So slowly is turning on his own police force. He's turning on the protesters. He's calling them violent. He's calling them insurrectionists. He's throwing the kitchen sink at everyone. And not only that, the Ottawa Police Twitter account has been disparaging the protesters as well, to the point where GoFundMe closed down their account. And I said this last week, I don't know why they would even use GoFundMe in the first place, but I don't think they knew any better. But GoFundMe closed their account. I think there was $9 or $10 million in it. And this police chief has turned on his own police force, essentially saying, hey, if you support any of the protesters in any way, shape, or form, I'm going to prosecute you. That's insane. That is absolutely insane to me that a police chief would say something like that. But I was looking at his bio, and slowly used to work for a company called Deloitte. And I don't know if many of you know what Deloitte is. Back in the day, the name was Deloitte and Touche. Similar to Arthur Andersen, if anyone remembers Arthur Andersen. Arthur Andersen was one of the big accounting firms back in the day. And when I was in college, it was one of those things when I was majoring in accounting, wanted to, that was what you aspired to. You wanted to be part of I think it was the Big Eight at the time, and maybe even Big Six, because they kept on either getting taken over, accumulated, or shut down. But Arthur Andersen was involved in the Enron scandal back in the tech bubble. And they were involved in, cooking the books along with Enron. And they ended up having to shut down. And Deloitte does similar things that Arthur Andersen does. They're a tax accounting firm. They do tax advice and different things like that, but mostly for Fortune 500 companies, really big companies. And I just found it really strange that a police chief from Ottawa came from Deloitte. I've never heard that before. And maybe things are different in Canada because I'm American. I don't know any different. Maybe somebody can explain that to me, but I thought it very odd that you have a police chief that's acting in the way that he is towards the protesters and towards his own police force. And he came from one of the I think it's a big four accounting firms in the world. I don't get it. And so, as I think a lot of you know that are watching this, you understand who's really in control here with everything across the planet. Big, gigantic oligarchs, corporations running the politicians taking the orders from these large companies. And the oligarchy is in control. And Deloitte is one of those companies that works for these big crony capitalists. And so for this guy, when I found out that he worked for Deloitte and then I see him saying the things that he's saying, it kind of all came together. I still don't understand why a police chief would be a police chief from working from Deloitte. It just doesn't work for me. But I sort of understand now why it makes a little bit more sense of why he's acting the way that he is, because he works for the big, giant corporations. They tell him what to do. And for this guy to say the things that he's been saying, and then also thanking GoFundMe for shutting down their account, in my opinion, my humble opinion, he's committing GoFundMe without a doubt. And I'm going to get into this in a couple of minutes. GoFundMe is committing fraud. They take $10 million of money and they decide, oh, we're not going to give it to the quote unquote violent protesters. We're going to give it to somebody else. And the police chief of Ottawa, Slowly, I don't care how you pronounce his name, I'm calling him Slowly from here on out. This guy thanks GoFundMe for seizing essentially money that belongs to the protesters. That's committing fraud, in my opinion. I mean, I think there needs to be, a separate protest or a call for his firing. Or his resignation. I think he really needs to be fired. And in fact, I didn't have time to put the clip in. My wife sent me a clip of someone asking police officers on the ground, have they seen any violence? And the cop said no. He hadn't seen any violence. So who's telling the truth here? You have this Slowly guy saying that these are illegal protests and they're violent and they're horrible people. And then he tells GoFundMe to steal all the money from the protesters or to seize it, give it to somebody else. Now, when I posted this video originally on my YouTube channel, it got ratioed like bad. And I think the main reason why is because of what he said. Everybody hit the thumbs down on it. And unfortunately, it didn't get the as much play as it should have as the other videos did, because of being so downvoted. And I think primarily because people were angry at what he said, and I don't blame them. Unfortunately, it affected the play, and that's why I wanted to go over it again in the live stream, because these are the things that people have to be aware of and be careful of and pay attention to when you have law enforcement. Thanks, Jane. Going to its citizens and essentially, in my opinion, lying to them. I mean, he is lying to them. And then telling a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company to take $10 million of somebody's money and say you're not going to get it. But what's nice is Give, Send, Go has taken over, and I'll go over that in a minute. But I want to talk about the real protesters, because I did videos on a couple of people. This first lady here came from Poland, and in that video, she was with a couple of ladies, and they own she's from Poland, a Polish restaurant, and brought food, bread, donuts, all kinds of stuff for the protesters. And when she was asked, like, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? She said, well, because I came from a communist country, and I see what's happening to Canada. And when she says that, that's, it's really representing the most of the planet right now. And she said, I don't want to live in a communist country. I left a communist country so I can come to a free country. And now it's being essentially communist again by what's happening in Canada. So I decided I was going to take Polish sausages, bread, donuts, and give them to the protesters. Now, does that seem like a violent person to you? Is that somebody burning down somebody's business? Is that somebody going around beating someone with a baseball bat? No. It's somebody who came from a horrible regime totalitarian regime, oppressive regime, and said, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be part of that anymore. I want to live in a free country. The next guy over here is a truck driver. Don't know his name. But in his interview, he said, I woke up, came out to the bed of my truck with all kinds of food on the trailer. And he said, I can't believe that I'm part of this fringe minority. He was so happy about being part of the fringe minority that Trudeau likes to call it. And he said, I came out to the bed of my truck with boxes full of food and tons of thank you notes. And there's one of the thank you notes in the screen here. People saying, thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for standing up for our rights. Thank you for standing up for our children's rights. They're not burning down buildings. They're not smashing police cars. They're not burning police buildings. And so my question is, if these people are so violent and so vile and so terrible that slowly gets their GoFundMe account shut down, if they're so terrible, then why isn't the mainstream media covering it? Wouldn't that be in their best interest? Why wouldn't they put this all over TV and say, hey, look at all these crazy lunatics. They're burning cars, they're burning businesses down, they're assaulting police or assaulting each other, all this kind of stuff. You hear little stories peppered in here and there. I don't see anything on camera. But slowly we'll sure sit there and lie straight to your face and tell you that's what's going on. And there's another difference between the protesters who are violent and these protesters. These are protesters who are hardworking people. They own businesses. And they're taking products from their businesses and donating them to the protesters. They're truck drivers that probably own their own business, own their own truck, all that stuff. These are people who are producers. They produce things, they make things, they do things, they transport things. What do the violent people do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They do nothing. They serve no purpose. They destroy. They burn down. They destruction. Tear things down. Everything about it is negative. These guys are all positive. And they're being made out by slowly to be terrible people. What a shameful individual he is. What a disgusting person. And that man's the police chief of Ottawa. I can't believe it. And going back to what, if the protests are so violent and so crazy and wild and just terrible, then why isn't it being televised? 16,000 votes a week ago. Are you guys seeing any of this on the mainstream media? Overwhelming number. Almost 90% said no. What does that tell you? So if these people are so terrible and they're doing all these terrible things, why isn't it being televised? But I'll show you what'll be televised. This became a meme. The Kenosha riots. And people have short-term memory, so a lot of them don't remember what ended up happening during the summer. And this just kind of represents the mainstream media, and they wonder why they're getting destroyed by people like Joe Rogan and other independent content creators. They wonder why they lose 90% of their viewership. I mean, AT&T, I know behind the scenes is desperately trying to to unload CNN. Jeff Zucker resigns because of a inappropriate relationship. There was no big deal on that. It was for them to not admit that they're getting crushed. And they're all getting crushed. And so, and this is one of the reasons why. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, but it's real. Fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting. I mean, this absolutely became a meme because it was so obscene. But this is going back to compare the protesters in Ottawa and other cities and compare them to what happened in LA, in Minneapolis, Kenosha. You know, it's remarkable. And so, with Slowly saying what he said about these protesters, GoFundMe, going back to what I was talking about earlier, shut down their account and said they're just going to give back, or they're going to give money to other charities, is what I read. But Florida, and this is why, and I see a lot of you earlier in the chat, we're talking about, what's happening, how they, want to move to Florida. I totally get it. I mean, there was, I think last year, 250,000 people. Florida was the biggest out of all the states, the most people that moved to another state out of like California and other blue states was to Florida. But the main reason is DeSantis. And DeSantis, here he comes, saying he's going to open up an investigation against GoFundMe for canceling the Freedom Convoy's fundraising page. And good for him for doing that. Because somebody needs to do something. And so he's going to work with our state's attorney general to go after GoFundMe. I don't know what's going to happen with it. Hopefully it does. Hopefully something does. But in my opinion, it's fraud. And if this is a lesson learned too, needs to go out to as many people as possible to never use GoFundMe ever. Use Give, Send, Go. But do you see what they're doing? Do you see what the leftists are doing? I mean, they shut down for you to make money. I mean, how evil are you to shut down somebody's ability to raise funds or make a living? How evil do you have to be? Like, how psychotic do you have to be to do stuff like that? And people were suggesting doing a chargeback to their credit card on GoFundMe and I think it's like a $15 hit each time. That thing, unfortunately, that takes a long time. I don't think that's something that would happen overnight. It would be nice if you could just, punish them that way from a monetary standpoint. But I think the easiest thing to do, at least in my opinion, is get your money back and give it to Give, Send, Go. Now, that's a much faster way of doing it. And then let the legal system hopefully work itself out and punish GoFundMe for fraud. But here's a tweet from DeSantis talking about how he's going to work with Ashley Moody to investigate. Because it's not only just taking the money, but it's also the amount of time. I mean, this is like what they're doing to Joe Rogan and what they do to everybody else that has a different narrative, that doesn't go against the totalitarian regime. They try to punish you. But Pierre Polyev, I think I'm saying that right, and he in the chat can correct me if I'm saying it wrong. He announced on Friday that he's going to be announcing for, he announced that he's going to be running for prime minister. I don't know much about Canadian politics. I tried reading up on it. It's very complicated to me. I see, the different parties, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, the New Liberal Party. There's a lot of different parties. I think America probably could learn from that, having more than two parties, more than just a Republican and Democrat Party. But I think this guy, Pierre, seems to me like a really good person. And I did a video last week when he was walking into a building. I don't know what building it was, but he was hounded by the left-wing media, who again disparaged the protesters, calling them violent and racist, and the playbook that the blue always uses, the lefties always use the same stupid ass playbook that they use over and over and over again, that the protesters are racist and they're all this stuff. And he turns around and says, it's funny how all of you label an entire group of people based on maybe one person's actions. And to see how he responded, to see how he kind of shut the media down. I haven't really even seen that in my own country, in America. The only person that's really similar to Pierre, I'm not going to try to attempt to say his last name again, but is DeSantis. DeSantis reminds me of Pierre a lot. And that's why it's great living in the state of Florida, because of people like Pierre and DeSantis. And when Pierre gave his address last night, he made it very clear that he was going to be giving the country back to the people. And I know from some of you will probably think, well, it's not going to make any difference if conservatives come into power, they're not going to do anything. Maybe you're right. But it's way better than what we're going through now. I mean, even if Trump were in office, I don't see mandates being in place like they are now. I don't see the things happening that we're dealing with in a lot of these blue states happening. And I do think that this guy, Pierre, it would be the same way. I think by listening to him and watching him talk as little as I have watched, he seems to me like a type of person who really does mean what he says. And fiscally conservative. I did watch a video where there was some sort of a meeting that he had, and he kept asking over and over again, where's the money coming from? And no one can give him an answer. But anyway, he is somebody who I think would be great for Canada, and he would also be great for the United States. But you can continue to have somebody like Justin Trudeau who said this.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar.
So Justin Trudeau just got through saying, I don't know how old this video is, that he admires China's dictatorship. Do you remember how many people said that Donald Trump was a dictator? Do you know how many people believe that the mainstream media, when they told them and lied straight to their face that Trump was a dictator? Here you have an actual Prime Minister of Canada actually saying that he admires a dictatorship because it allows them to do what it is they think they should do. So all this green technology and, all the, the carbon emissions, all this stuff that they want to do to all of us, all the things that they want to control us on. He just admitted to everybody, and I don't know why people forgot about this. I mean, I knew this the whole time. That's why I could never understand why someone would vote for this guy. Because this guy thinks that dictatorships are cool. It's pretty cool that I can tell people what I want them to do because I think it's right. That's not what politicians are supposed to do. They're supposed to listen to the people. But a chosen few elites that I think have a lot of control, the corporations, and then, you have the Bilderberg Group, you have people like Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, all these people who think they know better. They're people who can control what it is that we do because of our carbon footprint. And so we need to put dictators in place in order to, because they know better than us. A university professor knows better than all of us on how to run the planet. And I've got plenty of college credit, and let me tell you something. There aren't very many university professors that know much. In fact, most of them are university professors for a reason. Because a lot of them are a joke. So here you have an actual true admitted dictator. Because I'll go as far as to say is that if he agrees with it, if he likes it, he likes China's dictatorship, then that's how he wants to run. That's how he's going to do his thing. And when people say, "Oh no, that's not going to happen. We're coming to Ottawa, and by the way, we're going to do it peacefully. We're just going to come on in and just sit there and wait you out." What does a dictatorship do? The dictatorship calls them insurrectionists, calls them violent, calls them terrible people. That's what dictatorship governments do. In the Middle East, they would shoot protesters. I mean, they were even calling for that using the military. And I think the military just said that you're on your own, pal. We're not gonna, can you imagine people going in there and violently removing these protesters? The tow truck companies say, go screw yourself. We're not going to tow these trucks. Were you nuts? And just like in our own government, calling people who were at the January 6th deal insurrectionists. You see what they're doing to people who were there. I mean, they're being held without due process in jails in horrible conditions. And again, that doesn't happen in a free country. That happens in a dictatorship. That doesn't happen it shouldn't happen in America, shouldn't happen in Canada, but it is. In Australia, people being put in concentration camps. I just can't believe it's like, it's insane to watch. It's insane for me to see what's happening. You know, you have Trudeau in New Zealand, what's going on with New Zealand, and Morrison in Australia, Michael Gunner, and our own president. You know, people have to pay attention to who they're voting for. And I know some of you are saying in the chat that, you know, the elections are not on the up and up. I have to be careful what I say because I might get silenced. But it's really important, I think, that all of us that are paying attention to what's going on and are supporting the protesters, and we're doing what we can, is to educate as many people as we can about this stuff and spread these videos to as many people as you can so they can really see what is going on. Because there's still, to this day, it blows my mind how many people still believe that Kyle Rittenhouse shot 3 black people. To this day, people still believe that because that's what the media told them originally. There are probably, God only knows how many people think that all the protesters that are in Ottawa are violent. And you can see by, what I showed you earlier, what they're trying to show you, even in YouTube. ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC. These are the new. And do you see anything? There's one thing from ABC News about the protests. And I'm sure if you watch it, it would be negative. So it is important. It's very important to get the word out to people, and show these videos to people and say, hey, look, there's a reason why the mainstream media is losing so many viewers, and why this right here is a desperation attempt to stay relevant. Because more and more people, because thanks to Canada, are waking up more and more people. But it's still not enough. It's still not enough. We need to spread this information a lot more. All right, so let me see what we got. Yeah, and two, I know a lot of you are saying comparing CBC to CNN and in Canada, your networks. Are you seeing? And because I did that poll 7 days ago, has anything changed from a standpoint of any more coverage? I mean, is anyone seeing any coverage at all about what's going on? And if you are they? Are they lying about it? Or are they telling the truth about what's going on? And I mentioned this last week too. I thought it was, this is really funny, how there are people who were waving around Nazi flags and other flags. And I don't know whether, and I would bet, if I were to bet on it, I bet $20 that those people were hired by leftists to go and do that to disparage the protesters, because I think it's pretty funny. Later after that, the protesters were telling those people to leave and not come back. They told them, you got to get out of here. We don't want you here. I don't think anything has happened since then. But I know a lot of people are not even watching, and that's why you're here, because you're not even watching the mainstream media anyway. Minimal coverage. And the other things that I didn't show too are, how people are dancing in the street, and how positive everybody is during the protests. And another video that I had done as well was two police officers walked into, it sounds like a joke, walked into a bar basically telling people that, they kind of trying to demoralize the protesters in the bar by saying, well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What's going to, and people are like, look, you gotta pick a side. You have to figure out whose side you're on. And this is where I think, when you have Slowly saying what he's saying and doing what he's doing, it just makes it that much more difficult from a police perspective. But the police too have to make a decision. They have to make a decision on whose side am I on? Because when you see your police chief saying the things that he's saying, how can you continue to work there? And I'm sorry, I don't care if your excuse is, well, I have to feed my family, and find another job, man. For you to watch your police chief say the things that he said about the protesters, and I know you have to make a living, but at some point, during that confrontation with, well, it wasn't even a confrontation, it was just some words back and forth with RCMP and the protesters. The protesters are like, look, you gotta take a side, man. And the day of Rake is near. That was in Alberta. The RCMP lost that fight. I know that even the protesters were like, well, we'll open up a lane, or we'll open up one lane for traffic just to try and negotiate, because they're not, of course, they're not bad people. They're not the type of people that burn down businesses and assault people like the mainstream media is trying to make them out to be. Honey Pie says, stop the mafia-controlled governments. And that's the thing. And what's really frightening to me is to see almost every government across the planet is being run like a dictatorship. We're becoming China. I could never think, maybe 5 years ago or even or longer, that I could ever have to worry about what I would say. That if I say something, that something could happen. Like, there's no freedom of speech, there's no First Amendment anymore. And I know other countries don't really have a First Amendment like America does. But can you imagine that you have, and this is what really angers me about people that I'm going to finish like the last 10 minutes talking about, that these, I want to call them bobbleheads, the people that go around complaining about Donald Trump's mean tweets, saying that he's a dictator, believed all the Russian collusion lies from the mainstream media, believed that he was a dictator. And here we have those same people who were so upset about his personality that they decided they were going to vote for Joe Biden And a lot of the older folks thought that, or probably still think that Joe Biden's a nice guy. And then also vote for Trudeau and called Donald Trump a dictator. When you vote, you have a responsibility. It's a right, at least in America it is. It's the right to vote. But at the same time, you have a responsibility to educate yourself and pay attention to what's really going on. And that's why it's important to spread this type of information to as many people as possible so they can watch it. But it's amazing, too, how those same people who vote for Biden and hate Trump are unwilling to, in a lot of cases, are unwilling to actually watch this kind of stuff. Because they think it's fake. Because people like Brian Stelter on CNN says it is. Because they see the light at the end of the tunnel. They see that, sooner or later, like the New York Times and Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC, sooner or later are going to shut down, be done. But for people to just simply vote purely on emotion and not logic, this is why we have what we have right now. And it's really sad and scary. But it is a responsibility of voters to go out and pay attention and to read and I keep telling people that I know that you need to. It is your responsibility. You should go out and look at other outlets and news sources. But I said last week, I have one, relatively smart guy. He thinks that everything is, if it's not like the Guardian or New York Times or Washington Post or anything curated through your friggin' iPhone, that's fake news. And it's like, some people are just lost, and you're not going to be able to convince them. But this kind of stuff right now that's happening in Canada is a really good example, and should be an eye opener to a lot of people, especially with what Slowly is saying. For Slowly to say what he's saying about the protesters and then have GoFundMe shut their account down. If that doesn't open people's eyes, I don't know what will. Jane Bray, thank you for the super chat. She says all the towing companies are refusing to tow any protester due to COVID, like Trudeau. You know what would be nice if the towing companies just said, we're not going to tow these guys based on principle. How about that? All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here in a few minutes. Before I go, I do want to mention I am going to be, I've already launched the site. It's DennisHendrickson.substack.com. This is going to be a place where I'm going to be posting stuff that I can't put on YouTube. So, and then, I've begun starting the content process and making the content to put out there. But you can start signing up for that now. I'll have archived footage, and then also stuff again that with definitely with certainty would probably either be demonetized or not allowed on YouTube. So so head over there to DennisHendrickson.substack.com. you can join as a premium member. Of course, I'll have some free stuff on there too, but at least join the mailing list so when new stuff comes out, you can be notified on that. And again, I appreciate all the support. And be sure I'm going to be doing this every Sunday at 2:00 weekly. So you know for sure you'll know that it's going to happen and what day and what time and everything. And again, thank you everybody for the support. I appreciate all of the views. I mean, it's just been absolutely crazy. I never really thought. And again, the reason I started doing this is because it was originally a tennis channel. What happened to Djokovic, what was going on in Australia, totalitarian kind of stuff that was going on there. And then, I just said, you know what, I have to talk about it. Maybe no one's going to pay attention to it. But that's not the case. A lot of people are paying attention to it. It's great. There's a lot of you that are out there that are saying, hey, we've had enough. And as much as I possibly can to put out there the truth of what's going on, I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. And having y'all support has been great. And yeah, Jane, Rebel News is doing a lot of good stuff. And that's the thing. I mean, now it's got to be alternative media. And the reason I did the Substack is because, if for whatever reason they shut me down, at least I can be on another platform that people can go to. And, we just have to do as much as we possibly can to be on alternative platforms just in case. So anyway, thanks again, everybody. It was a great hour. Thank you for all your chats. Thank you for coming. And be sure to, before we go, everybody, before you leave, please hit the like button as much as you possibly can. And also be sure, if you're not a subscriber, to subscribe to the channel as well. And I will see all of you next week. Thanks for coming.